Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course Culturally Responsive Built Environments. Today we are going to talk about intangible cultural heritage. So till now in the conservation aspects we did talk about monuments, we did talk about caves, we did talk about the conservation aspects of built forms, but is it, if we are talking about heritage, is it only the form, the built forms, which we consider under the cultural heritage? That is the biggest question. In fact, the word intangible, actually if you look at intangible conditions, so what we have discussed earlier is more of a tangible, which we can physically touch it, physically look at it and experience it. But there are also other forms of heritage and other forms of cultural forms where you can get an immense experience into it. Like for example, it could be oral traditions, it could be a storytelling, it could be a narrative, how a grandmother tells the mythological stories or hymns to the grandsons and to the wider society. It could be a performing arts where one can celebrate with it. So if we have to understand the difference of the enjoyment and the celebration, Osho talks about the basic fundamental difference. When you go and watch a TV of a dance program or a particular auditorium and you watch a dance, you are enjoying the dance or a music. But where yourself dances, that means you are celebrating with in the dance. So that's the involvement it shows. The social practices, how each tribe, each caste, each social group follows certain social practices, social rituals. It could be based on religious activities, marriage ceremonies, or any other social events or any political gatherings, rituals, festive events, as we also discussed in the previous class about the altar of dead, knowledge and practices concerning nature and the universe, knowledge and skills to produce traditional crafts. That is where the knowledge, how it is transmitted from one generation to another and how it objectifies into a cultural art. Like for example, what you see here is a kind of even the chantings in the Mongolian tribes, how the chantings are very much associated in their identity and a sense of belonging. And there is also, it is not only about belonging or identity, but there is certain sets of information passing on from one generation to another generation. It talks about stories, it talks about the harvesting periods, it talks about the power hegemony, and so that is various aspects involved within this. And there is certain roles each community leader, like if it is a matrilineal society, a head woman takes an important role in it. And similarly, which are some of the indigenous traditions, especially in the Moroccan, the Tuskegee martial dance of Western higher class, so which is urgent need to safeguard these kind of traditions. So cultural heritage does not end at monuments and collections of objects as we just described. So till now we have discussed only about the caves, temples. It also includes traditions or living expressions. It's all about living expressions inherited from our ancestors and passed on to our descendants, such as oral traditions, performing arts, social practices, rituals, festive events, knowledge, practices concerning nature and the universe and knowledge and skills to produce today. This is actually from the UNESCO. What the whole document the whole presentation which I'm talking is basically the very first stop you should stop in the UNESCO website. That's actually almost the whole set of traditions and which are well documented under the list. What are the various intangible traditions which are listed, which are on the process, and what are the various conventions that took place. So there's a given link, ich.unesco.org. So in early 2000 and 2001, there was an international roundtable of experts which was organized in Turin, Italy, for the purpose of drawing up an operational, so how we can develop an operational definition of the term intangible cultural heritage. So finally, they come up with this kind of definition: people's learned processes along with the knowledge, skills and creativity that inform and are developed by them, the products they create. So here you have to understand one thing, they are not directly talking about any products, but they are talking about the processes through which the knowledge and skills and creativity are gathered in such a way, and how they are developed and how they are processed and how they are formulating into kind of products. And the resources, spaces, because all of these are in the form of narratives or performatives which will be performed in a space, and other aspects of social and natural context necessary to their sustainability, because at the end we are narrowing out down to the sustainability, why they are sustainable, or how they have to. Now in today's conditions, imagine if there are some ill practices which might have harnessed a particular society or a particular gender, do we need to continue that? So that is a big question. So that is where we have to talk about the sustainability, so that which can have an equality and which can actually, which is not going to harm anyone. These processes provide living communities with a sense of continuity, so how they can continue with previous generations and are important to cultural identity as well as to safeguarding of cultural diversity and creativity of humanity. See, when we talk about creativity, much of the present generation, they only talk about either what they are developing in a kind of product or any algorithms or anything, but very much we ignore our local chants, local stories, local fairy tales, which has a lot of messages and which can actually enhance the cognitive and affective and psychomotor skills of the communities and the individuals. So the UNESCO, it recommends, it prepares a new international normative instrument on how to safeguard the cultural heritage by specifying some of these objectives. The one, to conserve human creations that may disappear forever. So whatever the man has made it, if it is about on the verge of disappearing, definitely we have to conserve it. Offering them recognition at the world level. So it might be at a local level, but how it is so unique and how it is contributing to the universal value, so how we can offer recognition and how we can take it to the world level. Reinforcing identity. So because in order to reinforce identity, there are various stakeholders who could be involved in it, and various processes should be engaged in order to establish the continuity of it and as well as to enhance the identity. Permitting social cooperation within groups and between groups. So it is not only this aspects goes within it and certain aspects, so we need to also bring the cooperation, how we exchange ideas, how we exchange performances, how there is a message which could be disseminated through within the group and as well as the in between different groups. Assuring historical continuity and promoting the creative diversity of humanity and facilitating access to the fruits of this creativity. So how we can also promote the market to it, how we can actually, one would be able to develop. One is the tourism is one of the important destination where these kind of performances could be also promoted through tourism development, it could be promoted to the conservation aspects into it, it could be sometimes even controlled. It can also inform the development control and how we can provide market. So, intangible cultural heritage is traditional, contemporary and living at the same time. So, it is not just only which was there, but it is. So, that is what it talks about. The intangible cultural heritage does not only represent the inherited traditions from the past, but also contemporary, rural and also urban, in which diverse cultural groups take part. It is inclusive. It is not forbidden for only a specific group, but it is inclusive where people can participate. So, that is where we may share expressions of intangible that are similar to those practiced by others. So, imagine two groups which have practices of similar lines. So, obviously there is a share, and we can also, whether it is from a neighboring village or from a city or the opposite side of the world. So, what they practice in the Incan tribes or in the Mayan civilization, obviously there are certain similarities in parts of Africa and as well as parts of Asian cultures. So, which have been adopted by peoples who have migrated and settled in different regions. They are all intangible cultural heritage which has been passed on from one generation to the other, have evolved in response to their environments, and they contribute to give us a sense of identity, continuity, providing a link from our past through the present to our future. So, this is very important. So, it is not only from our past, but we are mediating through the present to the future. So, that is where we are trying to include in an inclusive approach, and it is representative because each act of yours is representing your belonging. So, it is not just referred to as a cultural good on a comparative basis that this good is better, this practice is better. It is not on that comparative note, but for its exclusivity or its exceptional value. So, we are not comparing with what is happening a dance with an Afghan tribe dance with a Andaman or Nicobarese tribe dance, but instead of that we are looking at the exceptional and exclusive value of it. It thrives on its basis on the communities and depends on those whose knowledge of tradition, skill, customs are passed on to the rest of the community from generation to generation or to other communities. Because in a pastoral communities, obviously they wander around and how they disseminate to the other communities. It is a community based. When it is recognized as such by the communities, groups or individuals that create, maintain and transmit it, without their recognition nobody else can decide for them that a given expression or practice is their heritage. So, here when we are talking about a community, because it is a representative of that community, I mean it is the community is being identified with these acts and or the performances, but that is what one has to look at. Without their recognition, nobody else can decide for them that a given expression or practice is their heritage. So, there are a lot of debates on this, even if you talk about the Rasgulla, which has been a little tied between the Orissa and the Bengal. So, finally, Bengal have taken over the credit of it. So, in fact, obviously this is where we have to go back to the history. Even a small food item of Rasgulla which has a debate which state it belongs to or it has originated. So, UNESCO classifies this whole sets of intangible heritage into 5 different aspects. One is knowledge and practices, oral tradition expression, performing arts and social practices, traditional craftsmanship. So, let us go one by one. The oral traditions and expressions including language as a vehicle of the intangible heritage. So, why language is so much important you will see in the next slide, but here I am just giving you some of the listed aspects, traditional aspects into the intangible heritage. Like for example, we have in Philippines Hudhud chants of Ifugod community and which has been inscribed in the representative list, And if you see the sample,
The Hudhud is recited and chanted in the Ifugao community, which is well known for its system of irrigated rice terraces, during the sowing season, the rice harvest, and at funeral wakes. The Hudhud probably dates from before the 7th century and comprises more than 200 chants of 40 episodes each. A complete recitation often lasts between 3 and 4 days. As the Ifugao have a matrilineal culture, it is the wife who often plays the main part in the chants, and her brother occupies a higher position than her husband. The Hudhud is therefore valuable as an anthropological document. The language of the stories is full of figurative expressions and repetitions, and employs metonymy, metaphor, and onomatopoeia, which make transcription very difficult. The poet occupies a key position in the community, both as an historian and as a preacher, the main narrators often being old women. The Hudhud epic is chanted alternately by the first narrator and a choir. There is a single melody, common to the whole region, for all the verses. At present, there are very few written forms of this culture.
so what you have just seen is kind of how the chants is related to the harvesting seasons. They also sing during the ceremonial activities. They also, and you look at a kind of the way the matrilineal cultures do follow an order of how the wife is being superior, and rather than husband, how a brother plays an important role. And what we have understood about this is there is a lot of message within these chants, and gradually this practicing of chanting has come down, and there is obviously a threat how these chants might disappear, because nowadays even the manual harvesting is gradually coming down. So this whole chanting process is to do with the manual harvesting, whereas in the mechanized way of harvesting, obviously the chants have started gradually. So that is the biggest threat of this kind of. So when I talk about the chants and the languages, so what we have to see what Isha Foundation's Sadhguru Vasudeva has to say.
The phonetic range that is there in Indian languages is such, it stimulates every aspect of who you are. English language has a very narrow phonetic range. So this ability to use sounds to stimulate and trigger one's intelligence and energy within ourselves is something that we should not give up. Every child must know one more language other than English, whatever that is, because anyway our states are divided on linguistic basis. So in that state, whatever the language is, they must know. We should not kill these languages because it's taken thousands of years to create it. This is our national pride, that we have the maximum number of languages. If we had to create this many languages, see, we must understand this. For example, let's say Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. There are no geographical separation. There are no oceans between these states. There are no mountain ranges clearly demarcating and separating the populations for a long time. But though they lived here for thousands of years, they kept their language, these people kept their language. It's so beautiful. When they went to trade and transact, they learned the other language, but they always kept their language. But today, the new generations are losing their language so rapidly. It's very important, all of you, at least in your homes with your children and wherever possible, there must be a certain amount of time where we must use the local language. It's very important. We will regret this deeply after a couple of generations if we don't take care of it now. Because you can't bring back a language. You can kill it, but you can't breathe life into it, it's very difficult.
So, what the Sadhguru's message is to… it takes thousands of years to create a language, and what we are in the present generation with the urbanized versions of it, in the modernized way of living, we are completely fascinated with the Western way of languages and the uniform language in English. In fact, I have seen many of my friends living in abroad, their kids today, they don't speak Telugu or Tamil or Kannada or Hindi, because they hardly get an opportunity. So in fact, this is one thing even in my own family, what we try to do is in home, at least we talk to our children in our native language. So in that way, the children is more fluent about our own expressions. In that way, they have multilingual and they understand from where we are coming from. So the second aspect is about the performing arts, such as traditional music, dance and theatre. So in fact, this actually is performed in a space. It is not only just performed in an auditorium or a theatre, it could be the whole pastoral nomadic tribes also do have their performing arts, so that even the Mongolia, you can see the many pastoral tribes, how they pass on certain songs and music, and which talks about their travel, their seasons, their understanding of this nature. So that is where one of the example, Urtin Du, traditional folk long song. Of course, there are two, short song and long songs. So what you can see a small example of that.
The Urtin Du, or long song, is one of the two major forms of Mongolian songs, the other being the short song, Boginil Du. Widely believed to have originated 2,000 years ago, the Urtin Du has been recorded in literary works since the 13th century. A rich variety of regional styles has been preserved until today, and performances, as well as contemporary compositions, still play a major role in the social and cultural life of nomads living in Mongolia and in the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Republic, which is located in the northern part of the People's Republic of China. The Urtindu is a lyrical chant which is characterized by an abundance of ornamentation, falsetto, an extremely wide vocal range, and a free compositional form. The rising melody is slow and steady, while the falling melody is often intercepted with a lively rhythm. Performances and compositions of Urtindu are closely linked to the pastoral way of life of the Mongolian nomads on their ancestral...
What you can see is a kind of how even the way they attire during this performance is also a significant aspect, how the whole stretch of the vocal stretch from how it goes to low to high and high to low, and everything has its own, because if you look back into the history, it goes back about 2000 years ago and it is still written in the ancient text. So how we can protect these particular traditions is very crucial. Like I can give you in the contemporary files, in fact I'm fortunate to be the master of this student, one of the student, Abhinav Agarwal, who was my student from School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal. So what they did was, after architecture he went into the music management course in Spain and the College of Berkeley College, and then what he's doing is he's now capturing the folk traditions of especially in Rajasthan and in Himachal Pradesh, and he's basically creating a kind of a marketing platform for these folk traditions, how folk music and how this could be taken into the kind of as a new market arena. So in that way, this is one way of the way we can recognize these underlying folk traditions. And the agency name is about Anhad Foundation. So it's really, they're doing a very good work. Then the third aspect is about the social practices, rituals and festive events. So where it's called about Vimbuja healing dance in Malawi, and this is basically what they do is a kind of, it's been practiced within the groups, and especially they do the dancing, and they also have some kind of medical responses, like people who are mentally ill, or so they do some kind of treatments with the kind of music it was generated and the performances and how they go into their kind of trance levels. So this is all some of the, I'll just show you a small brief.
Vimbuza is a healing dance, popular among the Tumbuka people living in northern Malawi. It is an important manifestation of the Ngoma, a healing tradition found throughout Bantu-speaking Africa. Ngoma means drums of affliction. It carries considerable historical depth, and despite various attempts over the years to suppress it, remains a fundamental part of indigenous healthcare systems. The Vimbuza healing ritual goes back to the mid-19th century, when it developed as a means of overcoming traumatic experiences of oppression. It further developed as a healing dance under British occupation, although it was forbidden by Christian missionaries. Through possession by Vimbuza spirits, people could express their mental problems in a way that was accepted and understood by the surrounding society. For the Tombuka, Vimbuza has artistic value and a therapeutic function that complements other forms of medical treatment. Vimbuza is still practiced in rural areas where the Tombuku live. It continues to face oppression by Christian churches and modern medicine. Most patients are women who suffer from various forms of mental illness.
So this is one of the kind of rituals which has certain meanings into the medical understanding as well as kind of therapeutic healing. So I'm just showing you one or two cases. Then the knowledge and practices concerning nature and the universe. So one of the good example here is in the Andean cosmovision of the Calavaya, which is in Bolivia. And here in fact this whole Calavaya ethnic group is based in the mountainous Batista Savendra region of north of La Paz Traces in pre-Inca period. So in fact they evolved through the fusion of native and Christian religions, and they actually practice of ancestral medical techniques. They have a kind of indigenous understanding of the local available herbs and their fusions of it. And at the same time, the various rites and ceremonies related to these techniques form the basis of the local economy, because of that is how people visit these places. And it has many myths, rituals and artistic expressions, the way they attire and the way they perform these activities. So, but it is certainly to do with the kind of knowledge orientation, and which is an objectified form of the traditional craftsmanship, the Indonesian kreves, the sword sort of thing, which is also in the cultural heritage of humanity. And it is basically a kind of distinctive and asymmetrical dagger from Indonesia. It's both as a weapon and as a spiritual object. So it mythologically it was supposedly to have kind of magical powers. And the earliest known kris goes back to the 10th century and almost spread from the island of Java Island throughout Southeast Asia. So they are normally usually very narrow blade and with an asymmetric base. So the sheet is often made of the wood, through examples from ivory, even gold. So there's a variety of forms you get, and let's show you a small video.
The kris, or keris, is a distinctive asymmetrical dagger from Indonesia. Both weapon and spiritual object, the kris is considered to possess magical powers. The earliest known kris go back to the 10th century, and most probably originated on the island of Java, before spreading throughout Southeast Asia. Kris blades are usually narrow, with a wide asymmetrical base. The sheath is often made from wood, though many are made from precious materials such as ivory or even gold. A kris owes its aesthetic value to three elements. The dapur is the shape and design of the blade, of which there are some 40 variants. The pamur is the pattern of metal alloy decoration on the blade, of which there are approximately 120 variants.
So this is just briefly you understand about how even a small dagger plays an important symbolic role within a community, and it is actually on every day and its special ceremonies as well, and how it is handed down by generation to generation. And then If we look from the Indian context, so even now the Kumbh Mela, which was recently added in the Intangible Cultural Heritage Set, so inscribed in 2017. So this is a huge congregation of communities, especially the Naga Sadhus, how they take a holy bath, and that is how we normally conduct this kind of Kumbh Melas in 4 places. One is Allahabad, Haridwar, Ujjain and Nasik. So these are the 4 places the Kumbh Mela do take place. But the huge crowd pours over, and it brings the it brings various aspects of cultural economy, starting from hotels, starting from accommodation aspects, sanitation businesses, and the local craftsmanship, the rural goods coming and selling for it, and a variety of cultural economies come over, and it is also a kind of sacred bath. And what here, this is one of the interesting event, because irrespective of caste, creed, and they are not invited. Basically, people pour over as a kind of large gatherings. And so if one want to look at what are the various intangible cultural heritages which are listed under these UNESCO ICH. So you can go through the website and you can actually type even by country or by year. So you'll get to know all the details of it and how it was being documented. So similarly, in Indian context, we see the Kutiyattam, which is a Sanskrit theatre, which is also inscribed in 2008. So it is practiced in Kerala, in the southern state of India, and it is originating more than 2000 years ago. And Kutiyattam represents a synthesis of Sanskrit classicism and reflects the local traditions. So it is basically kind of 2 aspects. One is Neta Abhinaya, which is an eye expression, and Hasta Abhinaya, the language of gestures. So basically these are the 2 compositions which actually formulates this particular art, which is being passed on. I mean, even to become an expert in it, it takes 15-20 years. One has to practice all these areas. And very recently, even the yoga, which has been also listed under the intangible cultural heritage, because how even now today after the Modi government came, and then how the yoga is now considered as the International Yoga Day. So that is where it is not only about the body, it is about the mind. And it is about how it is beyond the body and mind. It's how you actually take a control of your breath, and how it goes back to your spiritual aspects rather than only the physical aspects of your being. And lastly, I would like to refer you to this kind of document on how an inventory is prepared for intangible cultural heritages, especially under the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. And there's also in the same website you have various lists of how different countries have followed different kinds of inventory process, and what are the limitations we have in this particular processes, and what basically we have to compile. So obviously it is our duty to understand, because when we come across these kind of oral traditions and the performances, we just see and enjoy and forget it. But one has to look at it, how they are continued, how they are able to survive, what kind of threats they do pose, and how we can actually lift them up. So this is where the recognition process, so one has to work under it. A lot of work has to be done on this aspect. Now, if you look at it, my final discussion on how I am summarizing into intangible cultural, or these 5 domains, and basically they're all in the form of narratives or performances, and at the bottom line is they're all performed in a place, in a physical place. So that is where, as an architect, we have to see how the relationship between the intangible and the tangible traditions do take place. Thank you very much.